chilling new video just now emerging in the immigration crackdown in Minnesota. ICE agents seen bursting through the door of an immigrant family's home in Minneapolis.
Can you put the guns down? There's kids in this house.
Out of our city! I'm not gonna get out of your city, number one. Yes!
You are looking at a mansion in Plymouth, Minnesota. It has 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, and a custom indoor basketball court. It looks like the home of a tech CEO or a professional athlete, but the people living inside this fortress of luxury are not captains of industry. They are convicted fraudsters who stole millions of dollars from hungry children. And despite being found guilty, they are still living in the house that your tax dollars bought. This is the reality of the Minneapolis standoff right now. While the media tells you that the federal government is targeting poor, struggling immigrants, the footage on the ground tells a completely different story. We are seeing federal agents moving through neighborhoods where the struggling residents are driving brand new luxury SUVs and living in million-dollar estates funded by the largest pandemic fraud in American history, and the government wants its money back. The new directive from Washington is not just to arrest the criminals, but to seize the assets. We are watching the beginning of a massive property seizure operation that is going to turn these wealthy suburbs upside down. But what nobody is talking about is the organized resistance that is rising up to stop these federal agents. You see, the fraudsters aren't just hiding, they are being protected. We have new video coming out of a local restaurant called Ola Area that shows exactly how this war is being fought. 2 plainclothes ICE agents walked into the restaurant. They weren't there to raid the kitchen. They weren't there to harass customers. They showed the manager a photo of a specific fugitive, a violent criminal who was legally ordered to be deported. They said, "We see her in the back. We just want to make the arrest quietly." And what did the manager do? Did she cooperate? Did she help remove a criminal from her workplace? No.
Make hold, make hold, make hold, make hold, make hold, make hold.
She told the federal agents to get out. She claimed they needed a warrant to enter the private area of the kitchen. She alerted the staff, and while she argued with the agents in the dining room, employees were seen running out the back door, jumping into cars, and speeding away. This business didn't just refuse to help. They actively harbored a fugitive and facilitated their escape. This is the sanctuary trap. Local businesses empowered by local politicians believe they have the right to block federal law enforcement. They call it protecting the community. But when you protect a fugitive who has broken the law, you aren't a hero. You are an accomplice. If you want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes, tap like. I'll reveal everything. So, how do you steal hundreds of millions of dollars right under the government's nose? It turns out the food scam was just the training wheels. We are talking about feeding our future, a scam so brazen it makes you want to throw up. A group of nonprofits claimed they were feeding thousands of Somali children every single day. They claimed they were serving 18,000 meals a month from restaurants the size of a closet. There were no meals. There were no children. There was just a wire transfer from the state government to a bank account and then a wire transfer to a luxury home builder. The owner of Safari Restaurant was convicted by a jury nearly 9 months ago. He was found guilty of stealing taxpayer money. Yet investigators have found that he and his wife are still the official owners of a $1.1 million home. They used stolen money for the down payment, and they are still sleeping in the master bedroom, while the taxpayers who were robbed struggle to pay rent. This is why the tension in Minneapolis is at a boiling point. The locals know this is happening. They drive by these houses, they see the cars, and they see their own elected officials going on television to call the investigation racist. They are trying to turn this into a race war to distract you from the class war. They want you to think this is about targeting a community because of who they are. But the feds don't care about where you come from. They care about the $50,000 in delinquent property taxes you owe on the mansion you bought with stolen cash. The narrative is collapsing. The struggling refugee story doesn't work when the refugee owns a better house than the judge. If you believe that stealing from hungry children should be punished, comment justice below. But the fraud didn't stop at food. That was just the appetizer. Investigators have uncovered 2 other massive schemes that were running at the exact same time, stealing even more money. And when you see how they used the homeless and the sick to line their pockets, you will understand why thousands of people are about to be forced out. The second scheme was the homeless housing grift, a masterclass in how to exploit a sanctuary city. Here is how it worked. A nonprofit, again run by the same network of politically connected individuals, went to the state of Minnesota and said, "We need money to house the homeless."
Do you have concerns about Somali-run daycares? Why or why not? I don't have any concerns because people are following the law.
In 2020, they asked for a modest $2.6 million. The state gave it to them. But once they realized nobody was checking the receipts, the greed took over. In 2021, they asked for $21 million. The next year, $42 million. And by the time the feds stepped in, they were requesting over $100 million a year. They just kept adding zeros to the invoice. And the state of Minnesota, terrified of being called insensitive to the homeless crisis, just kept cutting the checks. There was just one problem. None of the money was going to housing. Investigators found that the providers who were supposed to be sheltering the vulnerable were actually just sheltering the cash in their own pockets. They bought real estate, but not for the homeless, for themselves. They built a real estate empire using the suffering of people on the street as their cover story. But if that makes you angry, the third scheme will make you sick. It is centered on autistic children. Medical providers and clinics started billing the state for early intensive developmental and behavioral intervention. They claimed to be treating thousands of children for autism. Suddenly, the rate of autism diagnoses in this specific community skyrocketed to levels that defied medical science. Why? Because it pays well. The scammers realized that no government bureaucrat wants to be the guy who denies funding for a disabled child. It is the perfect shield. If you question the bill, you hate sick kids. If you question the housing money, you hate the homeless. If you question the food money, you want children to starve. They weaponized compassion. They turned empathy into a blank check. If you want to know the truth about how your tax dollars are really being spent while the media looks the other way, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. And this brings us to the most explosive political connection of all. We now know that as far back as 2020, the Minnesota Department of Education actually tried to question feeding our future. They saw the numbers didn't add up. They asked for proof. And what did the scammers do? They didn't show receipts. They threatened to sue the state for racism. They told the agency that if they didn't hand over the cash, they would go to the media and claim the government was discriminating against a minority-owned nonprofit, and the government caved. They were so afraid of the racist label that they handed over hundreds of millions of dollars to criminals they knew were lying. The race card wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was the crowbar they used to break open the vault. This is why the current raids are so shocking to the system. For the first time in a decade, the racism shield isn't working. The deportation army doesn't care about the political fallout. They are looking at the bank transfers. They are looking at the fake invoices. And they are finding that this wasn't just a local crime. The scammers were getting arrogant. They were flaunting their wealth. They were driving luxury cars to the very food banks that were supposed to be serving the poor. Everyone knew. The neighbors knew. The community knew. But anyone who spoke up was silenced by the threat of being called a bigot. Now the silence is breaking. We are seeing neighbors coming forward pointing out the houses asking why the government hasn't seized them yet. We are seeing reporters knocking on doors asking where the money went. And for the first time, the people inside those mansions are realizing that their political connections might not be enough to stop the eviction notice. The $250 million figure you keep hearing? That's just what they've proven so far. Whistleblowers and prosecutors believe the real number is closer to $2 billion. Think about that. $2 billion. That is enough money to revitalize every failing school in the state. It is enough to fix the roads. It is enough to give every family in Minnesota a tax break. Instead, it was siphoned off by a fraud industrial complex that viewed the state treasury as an all-you-can-eat buffet. And this created a new phenomenon: fraud tourism. We are learning that criminal gangs from other states and even other countries were flying into Minneapolis specifically to set up these fake nonprofits. They knew that Minnesota was an easy mark. They knew that if they just filled out the paperwork and threatened to call the governor a racist, the checks would clear within weeks. But the party is over.
The ICE agent right at the corner of the vehicle, that the person in the vehicle was attempting to turn the wheel so that they could flee the scene, and of course the ICE agent used that as the opportunity to shoot and ultimately kill the person who was in the vehicle.
The new directive from Washington is not just to arrest the criminals, but to seize the assets. We are watching the beginning of a total liquidation strategy. If you are here on a visa, or even if you have a green card, committing a felony like wire fraud or money laundering is a one-way ticket out of the United States. The deportation army isn't just looking for people crossing the border today. They are looking for the people who crossed 10 years ago and turned their American dream into an American nightmare for the taxpayer. We are looking at the potential deportation of thousands of individuals who were part of these networks. The sanctuary is collapsing because federal law trumps state feelings. If you stole from the government, you don't get to keep the house, you don't get to keep the car, and you certainly don't get to keep your residency. This is the seizing of Minneapolis. We are going to see neighborhoods hollowed out as these assets are seized. We are going to see businesses close as the money laundering operations are shut down. It is going to be painful, but it is the necessary chemotherapy to kill the cancer of corruption that has taken over the state. And we have to remember how close we came to losing everything. If the 2024 election had gone differently, this Minnesota model would have been exported to Washington, D.C. We would have seen Feeding Our Future chapters in every state. We would have seen the autism scheme replicated in Texas, in Florida, in Ohio. The entire country would have been looted just like Minnesota was. We dodged a bullet that would have bankrupted the nation. But now, the cleanup begins. And the question remains, will the politicians who allowed this to happen ever face justice? The fraudsters are going to prison. The managers are fleeing the country. But the people who signed the checks, the people who ignored the whistleblowers because they wanted the votes, they are still in power. They are still going on TV calling you racist for noticing that the learning center spelled learning wrong. They are still protecting the sanctuary that shelters the criminals. Until the leadership changes, until the people who opened the back door are removed from office, the threat remains. So this brings us to the final question, and I want you to really think about this before you answer. Do you believe that elected officials who oversaw this massive fraud should be investigated for criminal negligence? Or is that just political persecution? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.